Deep in the Amazon, hidden for centuries under this thick canopy of forest and savanna, lay the ruins of a civilization that honestly just shouldn't have been there. We're talking about a society so vast and so complex that its discovery is forcing us to completely rethink the history of the Americas. And today, we're going to dig into how. Seriously, take a second. What's the first image that pops into your head? Probably towering trees, right? Maybe this unbroken, impenetrable jungle, a wild, untamed wilderness with maybe a few small, isolated tribes living there. For a very, very long time, that was the picture everyone had. Well, it turns out that image has just been completely shattered. Recent discoveries, powered by some absolutely incredible technology, have revealed that this so-called pristine wilderness was anything but. In fact, it was a carefully managed and densely populated landscape, and the evidence points to a lost world we're only just beginning to wrap our heads around. Okay, so let's start with the evidence on the ground. And listen, we're not talking about a few scattered villages here. We are talking about a massive, interconnected network of settlements built by a people known as the Khazarabe. The sheer scale of their engineering is just incredible. For a full 1,000 years, the Khazarabe culture thrived in what is now Bolivia. They built hundreds of monumental mounds to live on, literally lifting their homes above the seasonal floods. And some of these things were over 20 meters tall. But they weren't isolated islands. They were all linked by this huge infrastructure of causeways and canals that they used for everything: transport, drainage, and to support really intensive maize farming. This was a highly organized, stay-in-one-place kind of society. So all of this brings us to the central mystery. I mean, a society that can build on this kind of scale must have been large. But how large? For decades, that question has been one of the biggest puzzles in Amazonian archaeology. Think about it. It's a huge challenge. There are no written records, no census data, nothing like that. All you have are these silent earthworks they left behind. So how in the world do you turn giant mounds of dirt into an actual head count? And this table just illustrates the problem perfectly. I mean, look at the range of previous estimates for this area. On the low end, you've got counts in the hundreds, but on the high end, over 250,000 people. The numbers were literally all over the map, which just shows how little we really knew. The science was completely unsettled. So, to finally crack this case, researchers needed a totally new approach. Instead of just relying on a single method, they came up with this really clever, multifaceted investigation. They decided to attack the problem from 3 completely different angles to see if they could finally get the numbers to line up. So this new approach combined 3 distinct methods: something called architectural energetics, then maximum carrying capacity, and finally, agent-based modeling. You can kind of think of it like a historical CSI, using 3 different forensic techniques to uncover the truth. Okay, so this first method, architectural energetics, is fascinating. Researchers calculated that the Khazarabe moved over 49 million cubic meters of earth. So this method asks a really practical question. What is the absolute minimum number of people you would need, working for 1,000 years, to move that much dirt using only simple tools? It's basically like trying to figure out the size of the construction crew for a project that lasted an entire millennium. The second clue comes from the environment itself. Maximum carrying capacity asks a pretty simple question. How many people could this land actually feed and support? By calculating the potential food from maize farming and the availability of other essentials like fuel wood, scientists could figure out the absolute upper limit for the population. The max number of people the land could sustain. Now, this third method is basically straight out of science fiction. Agent-based modeling creates a computer simulation of the Khazarabe world. I mean, it's pretty much like running a 1,000-year game of civilization. Researchers programmed these little digital households with rules for how to farm, reproduce, and move around, and then they ran the simulation thousands of times to see which scenarios could actually produce the landscape we see today. It's like a virtual lab for testing history. So there you have it. 3 totally independent lines of evidence: the minimum workforce needed to build everything, the maximum population the land could support, and a computer simulation of what was even possible over time. The really crucial part is seeing where these 3 different methods all point, where they overlap. So, what happens when you put it all together? What's the population number that satisfies all 3 of these models? Well, the answer changes everything. The model showed that the absolute bare minimum population required to build everything we see, the mounds, the canals, all of it, was at least 10,000 people.
Now just think about that. Even at the most conservative estimate, this was a population larger than many medieval European towns. And that's the floor.
But the other two models, the carrying capacity of the land and the most successful computer simulations, they suggest the population could have been much, much larger. They point to a potential peak population of up to 100,000 people. 100,000 in an area we once dismissed as empty wilderness. That is just a truly staggering number. Now, let's put that into perspective. For decades, the assumed carrying capacity of the Amazon was less than 1 person per square kilometer. Even today, the rural population density in that exact same area is still less than 1. The Kasarabe, they achieved a density of between 2 and 20 people per square kilometer. They weren't just surviving in the Amazon, they were thriving at a density that was thought to be completely impossible.
Now, this wasn't a city like, say, ancient Rome or Tenochtitlan, with people packed tightly together. Researchers have this great term for it: low-density agrarian urbanism. Think of it less like a modern metropolis and more like a sprawling, highly organized network of suburbs and garden cities, all interconnected by a massive infrastructure system. It's a completely different kind of city, a new model for us to think about.
Okay, so we know there were a lot of people, and they were incredibly organized. But what does that really tell us about their society? How were they governed? Who was in charge? Well, anthropologists have ways of classifying societies based on their complexity, and the Kasarabe, with their tiered settlements and massive public works, clearly weren't a simple tribe. All the evidence points to a highly complex chiefdom, where powerful leaders could organize huge amounts of labor and redistribute all the goods. Now, maybe it wasn't a full-on state with a permanent bureaucracy like ancient Rome, but this was a sophisticated political system that allowed them to literally engineer their entire landscape. Look, the discovery of the Kasarabe's true scale isn't just some local story from Bolivia. It has massive implications for how we understand the entire Western Hemisphere before the arrival of Europeans.
So what's the big takeaway here? First, the Amazon wasn't wild. It was a vast garden, managed and shaped by human hands for thousands of years. Second, large urban societies could and absolutely did flourish there. And third, this adds to a growing mountain of evidence that the population of the Americas before 1492 was far, far larger than we've been taught. I mean, the Kasarabe population was on par with famous centers like Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis. We are talking about a major center of civilization, hidden in plain sight.
Ultimately, the story of the Kasarabe is just this powerful testament to human ingenuity. They didn't just adapt to a challenging environment. They completely transformed it to build a thriving, complex society that lasted for 1,000 years. It's a piece of our history that was lost, buried under centuries of both myth and soil.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really tantalizing thought. This massive urban landscape remained completely hidden from science until just a few years ago. It really makes you wonder, what else is out there, just waiting for us to find it? What other lost chapters of our shared human story are just waiting to be read?